So now maybe Javid, and we will leave Mr. Officer up to the end. Yes, Javid.
Am I mute? Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to the India International Center. Thank you to Radha for organizing this. It's a wonderful opportunity. And may I also just say that my thoughts and prayers are with the many friends that we have in India, and they're going through a difficult time. It's also in order for me, because I think I'm not only just here on behalf of Heart of Asia Society as one of the two sponsors or organizers of the volume, but also for the Kakar History Foundation, who is chairman. Kaun Kakar is not here with us today. To just say what an honor it has been to work with these amazing leaders who are joining us on this panel as well. It's been wonderful also to work with the many others who are not here, but who contributed essays. As Jawan Sher said, it's been an extremely enriching experience, and we're grateful and we're really proud and honored that we've been able to put it out at this important time. So thank you, and thank you also, Jawan, for the wonderful work that you have done on putting this volume together, on editing it. I won't say anything about it anymore, because I think both Barney and Jawan have covered the whole sort of relevance of the book to today's context. What I would probably say a few words would be more just following on from what Ambassador Brahimi said about the importance of the region, and various others as well highlighted that. But I think you can't really enter the conversation about the role of the region without first maybe very briefly assessing where the US right now stands, because the role of the US in Afghanistan, or the presence of the US, and I use US in a very sort of in broad sense, not just referring to the United States, but to its allies, to NATO, and the entire sort of international coalition or alliance that's been involved in Afghanistan over the last 2 decades. Their presence in Afghanistan has been one of the most determining factors of the region's relationship with Afghanistan. So I think when you talk about the region's role in current times, particularly in the peace process, let's see where the US stands now and what has changed. And obviously, the latest development in terms of the announcement on the troop withdrawal has had many impacts, but I think one very obvious thing that we are seeing, or we have seen it over the past few weeks, is a perception that the US role overall in Afghanistan and in the region, but I think specifically with regards to the peace process, is going to be diminished. Now, that is, we've seen it in statements. That's what the perception is here from where I'm talking in Kabul. This is the perception. I think we are also hearing that the Taliban would, they have a unique kind of relationship with the US, as you all know, but they probably will view the US role with sort of less seriousness now that all the leverage that existed is off the table now. And I think same is going to be true in the region. The region sees that role diminished. The important thing is, before I maybe discuss the region, to just say that this is not helpful. And the US does have a positive role to play, including in the peace process. And it's important to regain whatever leverage that's lost as a result of the military withdrawal has to be regained in other areas. And the examples are, well, I mean, obviously, I think one of the speakers referred to diplomacy. And one of the important areas in which the US role has to be strengthened from now on, even more, would be in the area of diplomacy, whether it's diplomacy with Afghanistan, with Afghans on the two sides of the conflict right now, or whether it's diplomacy at the regional level, because I think that's been one of the weak on the weaker sort of parts of the diplomatic effort led by Ambassador Khalilzad over the last 2 years, is that at the regional level, I think it has been inadequate, which explains the situation right now in terms of the regional involvement. The US role influence is also very important in terms of the its continued engagement with Afghanistan. The funding of the ANDSF is going to be hugely important, and some sort of we obviously we acknowledge that positive statements are being made, that there will be continued partnership, there will be continued support for Afghanistan, there will be funding for ANDSF. But we have also learned that unless these commitments are enshrined or embedded in some sort of a multilateral framework, a cooperation framework, it's hard to really take it seriously, and it's hard to count on it as a predictable commitment. So I think some sort of, I understand that there is some discussion at NATO about whether there may be some sort of a mission, a post-RS, post-resolute support mission that could be that could capture that. Obviously, I'm not talking about continued military presence in any way, but whatever commitment there is, whether it's in financial contribution, whether it's some support to the Afghan National Security Forces, training, whatever that's possible, would be good to have it in some sort of a multilateral framework rather than these bilateral statements of commitment. Briefly about the region, it's much more complex when you talk about the region. Some falsely assume that there is consensus in the region behind peace in Afghanistan, and they basically say so because they hear all the statements that are made, these conferences in which foreign ministers from all countries come, and then they make very similar statements. In fact, it's quite easy to cut and paste and just change the names of foreign ministers a lot of times when it comes to peace, because who opposes peace? Who would say that they don't support peace in Afghanistan? But I think you only have to scratch the surface a little bit, go a little deeper, and then you see that the picture underneath this sort of veneer of consensus is fractured, and it's fractured because despite very obvious areas of common interest, the region fundamentally disagrees about how to seek the protection of those interests. So, for example, there's obviously you could assume that the fact that Afghans should be peaceful would be something that the region would agree on. Everybody. You would also be, I think, right to assume that there's a shared fear about the prospects or the consequences of a collapse, a state collapse in Afghanistan, of civil war that will easily spill over to the region. That people are concerned about it. So why cannot those sort of common denominators cannot be translated as the basis for consensus building on the Afghan peace? Why is that the region has really not been able to play a role and bring it about? and to translated into real leverage and influence at the negotiation table. Because I think, as I said, number one is that they don't agree on strategy, on how this could be done. The other thing is that fundamentally the region has failed to detach Afghanistan from the geostrategic relationships that they have between themselves. The India-Pakistan question was mentioned before, but there are also others. That's not the only one. And I think the other thing that's been a problem in terms of region's role is that they don't individually, these countries individually have a view about what their role should be or could be, but they don't agree on. There've never been an effort to have a multilateral position on Afghanistan. There are these bilateral discussions, there are trilateral, there are quadrilateral, there is, and then obviously with with engagement of the US and others, you also see this troika and many other formats. But the region has lacked and still lacks. Isn't it surprising that in the middle of this very, very intense situation right now, with the region being deeply involved, we still do not have as a sort of a proper, consistent platform where regional countries can convene and discuss Afghanistan. At the international level, you have examples, but not at the regional level. So that's the situation of the region for you. And very briefly, I know I've probably taken my time, but very briefly, about how maybe we could cooperate. It's very important that to recognize that the departure of the US militarily speaking from Afghanistan is an opportunity for the region. For many, many years, for the past 2 decades, the region has seen US military presence as well. Some have seen it as threats, some as not so. But one thing that they have agreed on is that it's a variable. It's a variable factor. And to have a one variable less means more clarity. So therefore, it is an opportunity. The other thing is that the US, as I was mentioning, I think this sort of diplomacy is now center stage again. But this should be used to, I would say the US should use its influence to expand that consensus, some of those basic areas of common agreement that exist across the region, and expand on it. Like the fact that troops are no longer there, the fact that everybody agrees, at least notionally, with peace, or everybody sees the threat of counterterrorism and the future of counterterrorism as an important priority. Those could be expanded. I think there are also other things that could be used. Like which country in the region would support the return of the Islamic Emirate? I don't know. I can't find one. So therefore, why can't we use these examples of common interest as the basis for that regional consensus that we're building?